Hey everybody, Dr. Diane, board certified sexologist and libido doctor here, and we're talking today about orgasms. And we're going to break down some myths today in orgasm. We're going to talk about easier ways to achieve orgasm. And we're also going to remind you that your process with your own body and your pleasure body is unique to you. So going through the process of self-discovery, and we're going to talk about how to do that today, is a really important thing. I always like to remind you, if you have a difficult time orgasming, if you've never orgasmed, if your orgasms are not that great, that this is a fixable issue. Just because you've never experienced a great orgasm or an orgasm at all doesn't mean that's your destiny for life. It just means it hasn't happened yet. So please tune in for another interview with me on New Health with host Jessica Preston about orgasms and more. Here we go.
And we're back with Dr. Diane Mueller, naturopathic doctor who works with women ages 35 to 60, going from average to awesome in health, hormones, and relationships. Thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you.
So we've talked about foreplay, we've talked about some arousal, desire, we've talked about relationship and intimacy, and now I'd love to switch to the big O.
This is so important. It's such an important conversation. And when we're talking about the big O, when we're talking about orgasm, I want to start by normalizing that if you have not had an orgasm or it's very difficult, that you are not alone. It's actually estimated depending upon the research study, that somewhere between 10 to 15% of women do not have orgasms ever, have actually never had one. So if you've never had one, or you find this really difficult to achieve, or if you feel like numb and just lost a sensation in your genital region, any of that is like a normal experience, and there's hope for you, and there's ways we can heal this and ways we can open up orgasm. So that's hopefully what we're going to inspire everybody to do today.
I think that's great. I know so much in my own medical practice, it was, people that they didn't have the ability to achieve orgasm, they felt like there was actually something wrong with them, and that's not the case, and that you can actually achieve orgasm. It is something that is attainable. Doesn't matter what age that you are, right? Am I correct? It doesn't matter. There's no limit. You could start having orgasms in your 50s. Is this right?
Correct. Absolutely. There's absolutely no age, and the right age to start putting energy into this is wherever you're at right now. Mm-hmm. Since we're bringing up age, I think it's important to talk about, just also to normalize things, the difference between when men and women tend to learn how to have orgasm. And so one of the things we see, there's a really cool chart on this where we actually see that for most boys, they learn to have an orgasm sometime around puberty at an almost 100% rate. So puberty time, almost all boys learn how to have this. But for women, it is a much slower process. And we see graphs of this as women move from their, say, teens to 20s to 30s. It's a very, very slow ascent. And it actually never reaches the same level of normalcy around achieving orgasm as with men. And so that's just another way of normalizing it, because it's very, very common, because our genitalia are in many ways more complicated than the male genitalia. Our arousal needs, as we've talked about, are more complicated than the male arousal needs. And so because of that, it can take us a lot longer as women to learn how to have an orgasm.
I love how you are saying learn how to have an orgasm, because this is actually a learning process. People, I don't think of it like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot to learn, and some of it is the basic stuff such as turn-ons, turn-offs. What does your own unique pleasure body need? So some of it is just learning your own body. Some of it is learning how to feel safe to communicate this with a partner. Oftentimes, though, women have their first orgasm through self-pleasure and masturbation. So because of that, there's also this thing that happens around learning how to experience pleasure. And I really talk about in my work the permission for pleasure, that we actually have to drop in and give ourselves the permission to experience pleasure and let go. And that is it's a learned skill. It's not something that we are just naturally born with, oh, I'm going to pay attention to my pleasure body now, or I'm going to let myself completely relax and be vulnerable in this way that I've never experienced as a woman. We have to learn how to do that.
So there's someone said this, it was a man, a friend of mine said, men are a country road and women are a 5-lane highway when it comes to, they're thinking thought process and everything. So I think correct me, but what you're saying is we need to shut down the highway a little bit in order to be present and find a way to experience that and learn how to have those orgasms.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with this, there can be this thing of almost psyching oneself out. One of the questions that comes up sometimes in my practice is like, well, how do I get over the hill with orgasm? Meaning like, okay, I can feel my body feeling more pleasure, and then all of a sudden it just stops. And this is where like both men and women can experience their own unique versions of performance anxiety. Because for women, one of the things that can happen is like this getting over the hill thing, where it's like, oh, I'm getting closer and closer, and I feel more pleasure, and I feel more pleasure, and then where did it go? Right? And we can psych ourselves out to be like, oh, am I going to have an orgasm? Is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen now? And while the learning how to have an orgasm, we can, go through a system with that, there also is a detachment that needs to happen as well around like, meaning like putting your focus fully on pleasure. And I'm feeling pleasure. This feels good. Wow, this feels good. Can I relax even more and feel, pleasure even more? And so having that internal dialogue while also not being attached and being like, I'm going to enjoy pleasure for pleasure's sake without that attachment to the orgasm, because sometimes if we have too much of that attachment, we can psych ourselves out and we get stressed about it, and we can't tend to have orgasms when we're in this like, I'm stressed, this has to happen type of feeling.
And I think that partners get a lot of that feeling of satisfaction of, you've achieved an orgasm, I've achieved an orgasm. That means we've done our job, we're both good at what we're doing. And if not, I think a lot of people feel if there isn't an orgasm, that they've done something wrong or they haven't satisfied their partner in some way. So I'd love to address that myth that pleasure can still be had.
Absolutely. It's a really important point, because this is where I think it is back to that performance anxiety, where as women, there's oftentimes this one wanting to experience an orgasm, but there can be that pressure around like, okay, I need to do this, not just for me, because it's going to make my partner feel like they did a good job, and I want them to feel this because I care about them. And that leads into this vicious cycle. And unfortunately, that oftentimes also leads to faking it. Right? And I think faking orgasms it can be problematic in this whole process of how to have one, because it sends information to our partner that says, oh, you did a great job. My pleasure body responded to it. And so then what tends to happen is we get more of that thing that innately did not work with our pleasure body. So it is back in some ways to taking the pressure off. And these conversations we've had on other episodes around talking to partners around, okay, well, what does this other part of pleasure, what does being with me, what does connecting with me provide? And really realizing that take orgasm off the table, all of these other things that we're doing provide so many things, and they might be unique things. One person, it might be a sense of like connecting to something beyond them, maybe spiritual. Another person, it could be connecting heart to heart. Another person, it could be stress relief, right? Combination. But when we actually realize that those things we can still provide all of this value, orgasm aside, we can start to work to take the pressure off.
Yeah, no one's helping anyone out by faking an orgasm.
Correct.
Do not fake an orgasm where you're going to get yourself in a cycle of then that might be a faking cycle. You're going to do yourself a disservice, your partner a disservice, and that might cause a detachment in relationship itself. So how can people get into this space? Because I know a lot of our viewers have been in long-term relationships, are in long-term relationships, or even new relationships. How can we encourage people to reframe this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reframe is back to, okay, what are we showing up to this for beyond the orgasm? What is this providing? And going into, to take the pressure off, going into that intimate experience and say, oh, I'm doing this because I want to experience love. I want to experience connection. I want to connect because I want to feel close and intimacy, because I want to raise my oxytocin levels. So we go into that and just reframe it as, my goal is whatever we want it to be, but the goal could be connection instead of the goal being orgasm. So we take orgasm as this like bonus, but not as like the point, not as this end goal around, we're just going to enjoy each other along the way. And I do really encourage, especially women, to begin to masturbate if you have not, and to learn your own anatomy. And that can really help with understanding how your body responds and how to experience this and how to share this with a partner. The other thing I think we should bring up is this concept of not every woman is really anatomically designed where orgasming through intercourse is easy. And that anatomically was seen as related to the clitoral bulb that we showed in another episode, just basically that part of the clitoris that's easy to visualize, the distance between that and the vaginal opening. And if it's more than 2.5 centimeters, it's been shown that anatomically, it's a lot harder for women to achieve penetrative orgasms. So while I'm always like really truly personally believe in like the potential of the human to achieve orgasm, we see people have nipple orgasms and all these different things. But from a standpoint of taking a step back and learning how to do this, oftentimes we want to say, okay, well, what kind of positions can we get into that we can actually stimulate the clitoral head and the various areas of the clitoris that we've already described in that other episode in a way that is getting stimulated while we're having penetrative sex, for example.
So not just position, but also there are wearable toys that you can have with some vibration, or you can use some vibration toys in order to have stimulation during intercourse also, so that you can achieve that orgasm at the same time, if that is your goal. I know a lot of male partners want that to be the goal. Female too, you know, there's that simultaneous orgasm that you have together that always is so bonding and seems to be everyone's goal, but is harder to achieve for a lot of people. But that can be also very normal.
Yeah, it can be normal. And I think the thing is, like, this is like the practice thing, right? It's like the whole concept around like, oh, the new relationship experience and sex is like hottest in the beginning. Well, if we're actually bringing this curiosity to our sex life and we're trying different things and we're learning people's, like our partner's bodies, sex can actually be way hotter after years, because now we're at a point where it's like, oh, we're not, you know, if we develop the ability to chat about it and to say like, hey, this actually is better for my pleasure body, we get to know each other more and we can make it hotter. And the thing I always like men especially to understand, but women too, is bringing, say, a vibrator, bringing something into the bedroom is not like to replace, right? The idea of what we're looking at is how can we help the female body have more of her erogenous zones wake up so that she can experience the whole sexual experience more deeply. And I think that's a very careful, we have to be careful about how we have that conversation so people are not feeling like replaced and they're actually realizing this isn't about replacement. This is about better connection and more enhancement.
And I think when the male partner sees that joy and that enhancement, they're welcome. They're welcome to bring it on, baby.
Exactly.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Mueller, for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Please let everyone know how they can reach you and what you're working on.
I want to invite you to my 4-day Better Sex Jumpstart. That is right. My goal here is in 4 days, you will be having better sex. And since Love Day is coming up here very shortly, we are doing this live and I am doing this Jumpstart for free. So in the show notes, you will find the sign up link of how to have better sex in 4 days, step by step, with yours truly guiding you through the process. Make sure you get that coupon code. You will need that coupon code to bring the price down to $0. But we are going to go very, very deep and very, very thoroughly into a step-by-step process to really launch you into better sex coming up soon. Don't miss out. I have no idea if I'm going to be doing this again live or not. So this is your opportunity to get this for free. Please take advantage. I can't wait to have you there and all the sensual, juicy yumminess. Women, men, partners, all invited. So please come. It'll be so wonderful to have you. And I will see you there soon.